You know what I was thinking is like, what's interesting about me is how many me's there are. Okay? When I think about my life and I think about the progression of how I became who I am today, I think it's so crazy. I mean, my mind and my spirit fascinates me, and how it's been able to chameleonize itself in so many different environments. And when I mean so many, I literally mean my mum's French, my dad's Egyptian. I was born and brought up mostly in England. Let's start with my dad, right? Egyptian from Shubra, his family are very conservative. He made it to England. He's this extremely religious man, but he was very strict, but he's also got lots of love, but also has all these kind of subscribes to all these dogmas, you know, like that are very strict and very harsh. And then I've got my mum, who's a convert. She comes from a non-practicing Catholic family, but her dad is Algerian, non-practicing. He didn't pass on any of the Arabic knowledge or culture to her or her siblings. And she converted when she was 18 to Islam and met my dad. So her vision of Islam was very different to my dad's vision of Islam. And then they created us. I was born in Liverpool in England. The consistent feeling that I was going through was confusion. There were so many different versions of myself that I needed to be around different people in different scenarios and different groups. So often I had to start from zero and create this new persona. Or create this new like, oh yeah, I get what you mean, and then have to figure it out myself. I think when you think of building blocks, you think of 1, 2, 3, 4. One block goes over the next. But when you have to consistently start from block 1 and consistently relearn the basics throughout those primal years where you're kind of absorbing everything and where you're building your blocks, I think I had to restart from block 1 constantly. And that prevented me from potentially doing other things or channeling my energy in other ways that would have been more rewarding for me now. When I was in Egypt, I was known as the English one. And then coming back to England, I realised I'm not the English one. And even in terms of home, it's always been start from scratch, readjust. But yeah, I mean...
So how did you resolve this sense of having to restart? Have you consolidated all these me's?
I think that recently, about a year ago, I did have a realisation that I think what was most stressful about being so different with different people was the fact that I felt I was cheating people. I felt I was trying to trick people into seeing me as something that I'm not. So I didn't actually know what I was and what I wasn't. With my dad, you know, I'd pray and put the hijab on, and then with my friends I'd go clubbing and drink, and you know, and then with my boyfriend I would do this, and then with my French family, like they live in nature, they're far, like, you know, so then it would be like, oh my god, like look at the beautiful, like let's pick mushrooms and, you know, let's go back to this pure way of being, of living, to make salads. And so like there's so many different versions of me.
Isn't that a blessing?
It is a blessing. However, I also happen to be someone who highly values integrity and honesty and transparency. So obviously, me being so many different versions of myself that sometimes I don't even recognize, it's contradictory to my very core value, which is honesty and transparency. So that's where the war was. It was inside of myself. And I think what I've what I've done to combat that, or what I've done to resolve it a bit, has been to just realize that they are all true versions of myself. That it's not a trickery, that I'm not trying to convince someone to see me a certain way. I am just being what I need to be or what I want to be in specific situations to better my situation in that moment. So if that's me strengthening the connection between me and my father by praying with him, and in that moment feeling true in that prayer, then so be it. Even if I don't believe in that prayer, and even if I don't do it in my own time, then that is something that feels true in that moment, and I don't need to question it.
I've come to terms with this at stages. One time I remember one of my best friends, Karim, he lives in San Francisco now. He told me, for the first time I heard that phrase from him, he said, "I'm comfortable with my contradictions." And I'm like, epiphany, you know. I never heard that phrase spoken before. And then I evolved that, learning the new word, multitudes. So I said, I am multitudes. You know, and that has been my counter stance, if you will, with family or with people that I meet, where like, oh, you're Egyptian, so you do this and this and that, or you're one of us, so you do this and that, or, you know, how come you do this and that? And the answer would always be, I am multitudes. I can be this and I can be that. Actually, also, I remember now that I'm telling you the story, I remember that series called Lost. Remember that played on the network ABC? And there was John Locke, one of the characters, and he would always say, he started off the series crippled, and then on the island, when they crashed, he just stood up. And he would always say, don't tell me what I can and cannot be, or what I can and cannot do. And it always struck a chord of like, damn, that's badass. That's very bold that you know what you can and cannot do, and then you're drawing these boundaries, telling people to fuck off and not label you in one way or another. Their expectations they can shove them, you know. And
it's amazing you remember that,
because it left a mark. It was an imprint. I'm like, I should use that phrase more often. Or when are situations where I can, you know, draw my boundaries and say, wait a minute, what can I do and what can I not do? Is there anything I cannot do? Oh, there are these things. Why can I not do them? Is it because I am conforming? That's the key. One of the key things in generations is the idea of whether you conform or rebel against expectations. And what I'm listening from your story is a survival mechanism of adapting. It's neither conforming totally nor rebelling totally, but it's a matter of being elastic. And I think that's a very valuable quality, to be elastic in a multicultural setting.